Hello and welcome to Portugal, where I am here to drive the Alpine A110 S and ask the question, does it actually improve on the standard A110? And has Alpine done the right thing by making this car stiffer, more powerful, putting bigger tyres on it and all the rest? This might seem like a slightly strange question to ask, given that accepted wisdom has it if you want to make a sports car better, you do exactly that, don't you? You add more power, you add more tyres, you stiffen the suspension up, and you say it's better round the track. We're here at Estoril to put that claim to the test, but really I'm quite interested to see if it messes with the formula of what has made Alpine so distinctive and such a critical success thus far, because I've been lucky, I've spent plenty of time in the standard A110, and what I really love about that car is that it kind of rejects the accepted wisdom for sports cars. It's got quite skinny tyres, it's got quite soft suspension, it's really comfortable, it's really refined, but it's also very light and very rewarding of an enthusiastic driver, you know, the purist driver, somebody coming from a Lotus or something like that. And I think the way that the standard A110 combines seemingly opposing characteristics into a really interesting package is what sets it apart. And worried is perhaps a strong way to put it, but I'm interested to see whether or not the A110S actually improves on that, makes it nicer. It will probably make it better in terms of its performance and all the rest, but will it actually make it nicer? We shall explore that in due course, but let's first of all just talk around what makes an A110S compared with the standard A110. Now the headline is a 40 horsepower increase from 252 horsepower to 292. Torque stays the same at 236 pound-feet, but they're both delivered over a broader power range, so about another 400 revs extra up to 6,400 RPM. So the extra performance is there at the very top of the kind of rev range. The idea being that, you know, if you're going to enjoy the extra pace this car has, you're going to be doing it up in the revs, you're going to be revving it out and really driving it hard. That's where you're going to enjoy the extra performance. So other than that, it's the same 1.8 litre turbocharged Megane engine with a 7-speed dual clutch gearbox. The changes to the outside of the car are pretty minor, really. So we've now got the option of a carbon fibre roof that saves 1.9 kilos, so it's probably more an aesthetic feature than anything else. They haven't added any wings or aero or anything like that. They have changed the badging slightly, so you've got this carbon fibre thing here instead of the tricolour on the other car. The most significant changes really, and the ones that are going to inform how it drives, relate to the chassis. So the suspension has been tweaked quite considerably. So the spring rates are up by 50%, the anti-roll bars by 100%. So that's really going to change the character of the car. Perhaps get rid of that softness and refinement that personally I like in the standard one. They have dropped the ride height by a mere 4mm, but also reduced the stroke on the damper by 8mm. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but again, one of the key characteristics of the standard Alpine is the way it floats through the bumps, and that's because it has a lot of suspension travel compared with most sports cars. Other features for this car, it's got bigger tyres, so the 215, 245 now, whereas the standard car is 205, 235. Not much, but you know, all these things add up, and it's a new custom developed version of the Michelin PS4 tyre. This car has got the optional lightweight forged wheels, which I think look really nice. You could have those on the Premier edition as well, I think, but they're in a different finish. They've got this dark titanium finish, and as standard you get the fancy Brembo composite brake system, which is an option on other Alpines. Right, inside we'll just have a quick look at what we have in here. So it's a similar story in here. We've got much of the same features basically from the pure version of the standard A110. So we've got the nice Seatbelt seats, which are just 13 kilos a piece, fixed, and with you can have them with carbon fibre backs if you want. Things that set the S apart, again, you've got the little orange and carbon fibre badges here where you have the tricolours in the standard car, orange 12 o'clock marker on the steering wheel, orange stitching throughout the car just to set it apart and make it feel a bit more special, but it is fundamentally still the Alpine A110 that we know and love. It's a very light car still, so they haven't added a great deal to that. I think it's 1,114 kilos off the top of my head. That is about 16 kilos more than a pure, so it's not a lot heavier. Details really, and you can trim a bit more weight out of that with the carbon roof and the forged wheels as well. So it's still a very, very light car. That's kind of, you know, it's kind of Lotus territory. It's, you know, it's about 250 kilos lighter than the Porsche Cayman, which is kind of what this S is really gunning for. So that still remains a core kind of Alpine quality. The real question, as I started with, is whether this change in character improves the Alpine driving experience or perhaps corrupts it slightly even. I shall put that to the test now. We're about to head out on track, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so having started this video with a slightly provocative question of whether or not the Alpine can actually benefit from more horsepower and stiffer suspension and more rubber and all the rest of it, here we are on Estoril circuit to try and answer the question. Now we're just doing a bit of a warm-up lap behind the pace car now, so I'll take this opportunity to just talk a bit about how the car goes on the road, because I've just done a bit of a road loop around here already, and I can report that yes, there is definitely a bit more harshness in the car compared with the standard A110. The suspension is clearly stiffer, we know that, by quite a big margin, but I was interested to see whether or not that really compromised that kind of lovely floatiness that you get in the standard car. And it definitely does feel a bit more brittle. It kind of, where the standard one combines its lack of weight with that suspension travel to just kind of float over the bumps in a really lovely way without losing the kind of essential body control. This one does kind of fidget. It attacks the road a bit more like the Renault Sport hot hatches that the same guys who worked on the Alpine are better known for. So, you know, your Meganes, your Clios, those kind of cars. So it's a definite change in character and kind of ethos, really, because I've driven this car back to back with the Cayman T specifically, and what was nice on the road was that while the Cayman feels overwheeled, overtired, all the rest of it, the Alpine just has that lovely flow, and kind of what I'm worried about with this car is that it would lose that. There's definitely a compromise in comfort, absolutely no doubt about that. Whether it comes with an improvement on the track is what we're about to find out when we start doing our hot laps. But as I say, what I hope is they haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Straight away I can feel the extra steering precision. There's definitely more response, kind of off centre, you know, that initial kind of movement there. And the car doesn't roll around as much in the corners, even at that kind of low speed there. Now, again, on the road, that's kind of what makes the car so nice, because it gives you a sense of kind of weight transfer and all the rest of it at relatively low speeds. And that is one of the things that I really liked about the Alpine, is that you can drive it along a road at kind of sensible road speeds, you know, 60 miles an hour on a twisty back road, and it feels really entertaining and fun, because a bit like an MX-5 in that respect, it's not kind of anchored down to the tarmac like a Porsche. It's got a bit more flow to it, more like a Lotus, in fact, which is obviously another comparison that you would make with the Alpine. So it's a trade-off, as ever with these things. So the extra horsepower, I didn't really feel a huge difference on the road, but probably going to here on the track. Just queuing up for our go here. Now then, I've set up the track mode in the car, so you do that by pressing the sport button, and then when you hold the sport button down again, you get a kind of third mode with more relaxed track ESP and faster shifts. The other good thing about the track mode is that it doesn't upshift on its own either, so the manual mode is what it says it is. So here we go, just peeling out of the Estoril pit lane now. Even on that pit exit, you've got the extra response in the wheel there, and yeah, you can definitely feel the extra power straight away. Just in that, up to the top of the rev range there, you get that kind of surge that kind of just where the standard car is starting to run out of puff. Now, it doesn't feel super stiff and tied down like a Cayman here. It still feels, for a track car, it's still relatively soft. But one of the things that can kind of hamper the car a little bit on track is that in big braking zones like that one, the weight goes all the way over forwards, unloads the rear wheels, and it can get quite unstable in the turns there. So, and actually, because of that softness, the standard car is actually more playful because of the weight transfer, because that affects the contact pressures on the tyres and all the rest of it. This A110 S is actually more neutral, so, which is obviously a more traditional track car, but this long parabolica last turn here at Estoril is a good test because it's a steady state corner, and that neutrality is definitely coming through. It actually understeers quite a lot through that long, fast corner like that. So it's not perhaps as sharp on the front end as a Cayman, but turning on the brakes, maybe lift mid-corner like that, and there's a sense of adjustability in it, which is kind of what you'd expect of guys like the Renault Sport team to have done. So again, just turning on the brakes there, lift, yeah, and it does tuck in a little bit. It doesn't it doesn't feel quite as playful, mainly because it's gripping harder, but it's definitely more appropriate on the circuit in this, guys. And the lack of weight just gives it a great agility in the corners, and it's not slow. I mean, we're 120 miles an hour down that straight. Turning on the brakes, just do a little lift, and you see it tucks in there, so hard on the power. In these kind of fast corners, it doesn't really have the power to really trouble the chassis too much, so it's kind of, there's definitely some interruption coming on through the ESP is supposed to be off, but it's definitely still doing something. This corner here can upset the car if I give it a little bung there. There. So if you provoke it, there is an agile little car in there, and although it doesn't have a limited slip diff, it uses a brake nibbling item. It's good enough for Lotus, it's good enough for McLaren, it saves weight, it kind of fits in with the Alpine ethos. So there's a sense of playfulness in this car, which is really nice. It's just buried a little bit deeper than perhaps it would be in a Cayman. I've driven Caymans on track, and they are, one of the great things about them is that in this environment they're definitely more dialed down, but then you'd expect that because a Cayman's running kind of 20-inch wheels. We're only on 18s, and in fact, even on a Cayman T, the front tyres are as wide as the rears on an Alpine, so that kind of tells you a lot about what's required of the extra weight in that car. But clearly what this car is, there's a much more serious car inside the Alpine. We know that because they made a race car out of it. They made a rally car out of it. And somebody I know who's been playing around with suspension modifications, he said there's tons of adjustment because it's proper double wishbone suspension all round, and there's actually a lot of adjustability in the setup, so you can, for a chassis tuner, if you want to play with geometry, maybe dial in a bit more front end there is that potential in there, and it's nice to see some more of it being unlocked in this car. I'll try and give it another little bung here. There we go. I mean, it's not a natural drift car, but it does have some mobility. One of my colleagues there has just had a little spin. A bit too much mobility in that case. But even when you overcook it, it's a car that's kind of... Because one of the things I was afraid of was that with extra grip, extra stiffness in the chassis, rather than have that huge kind of window of adjustability, instead you increase the grip, but you get more of that kind of knife edge sensation, so a bit more like a race car. You know, you can push and push and push and push and push, and then when the grip runs out, it's done, it's over. And you're facing the wrong way, like my colleague there. But generally, it's a really playful, lovely car. I think in this environment, it's sharpened it up really nicely. So, you know, the provocative question is, has Alpine ruined the A110 by making it stiffer and more powerful and all the rest? No, it hasn't. Of course it hasn't, because it was already a really good car, and it's just made it sharper. Whether or not it's the one I would actually have, I don't know. I think the standard A110 is such a lovely thing as a road car that if that's where I were going to be driving it, I think I'd stick with the standard one. But this S shows the potential in the car, and I think for people kind of making that transition from more conventional sports cars, maybe people coming from Caymans, TTs, cars like that, this A110 S is going to really win them over and kind of convince them that maybe there's something in this lightweight French car after all. And that's got to be a good thing.